Welcome back to the healing room. Tonight's topic of conversation is the role of suffering. And being on a spiritual path for many years now, 30 plus years, I have come to the conclusion that suffering is a spiritual device that allows for the evolution of consciousness of the soul. That it's actually suffering is actually the way the soul comes back online, that the soul becomes more and more present to what is, to this moment. That when we allow ourselves to feel deeply, to be with the pain of the world, the pain of the body, the pain of the heart, that when we allow ourselves to be with these experiences, to drop into it, then we go through a particular transformation. That the suffering is a portal that brings us to one state of consciousness to another. From the limited ego personality to the greater soul aspect and all of its positive qualities. So it's unfortunate that in our culture, the focus is on that which is positive, wanting to feel good, wanting to be free of pain, of disease. And so what we do because of that is we abort the process of the healing and transformation that happens when we go through an experience of suffering. And this plays out very strongly in our Western medicine that is constantly trying to stop symptoms, constantly telling us we don't have to feel pain. There's a drug or something or an operation that will free you of what pain and ails you. But you're just basically kicking the can down the road and numbing the body and the mind. For example, if someone is suffering from depression and they take antidepressants, you can take that for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. Doesn't mean that you have healed. It simply means that you've numbed your experience. So that depression is information that the soul, the personality, the being is receiving because something needs to be looked at, something needs to be dealt with. And so when we drop into the experience of depression, then something, the more we drop in, the more it is revealed to us the source and the cause of depression. But to take like something like an antidepressant creates more suffering later on down the road because then the problem becomes chronic, as well as these types of meds will change the configuration of the brain. So not only did you not deal with your depression, now you're going to have physiological problems to contend with as well. So greater suffering because of not wanting to deal with the suffering that's present. I had somebody come to me the other day as an emergency who was coughing for 2 weeks and really, really miserable. And they said, if I can't get in with you, I'm just going to go do antibiotics. And I said, well, if you do antibiotics, it doesn't make sense to come to me because one is suppressive therapy, as opposed to the holistic medicine that I do is expressive therapy. I want to get to the core and cause of the cough, which to me is not physical. It's not germ related. Germs, physical body is usually the result, not the cause of disease. So fortunately, she was able to come in and I sat, I listened, and then I started giving flower essences, and then the emotions started to move. The revelation started to come. The source of the dis-ease revealed itself from the subconscious mind. Then I gave a homeopathic remedy to acknowledge the energy aspect of the illness, as well as a flower essence combination to deal with the emotional, the psycho-emotional piece, and then the tissue salts to deal with the physiology, the biochemistry of the body. So in this way, I got to every level, physical, emotional, energetic, complete healing, complete acknowledgement of all the levels. And the next day I get a message, amazing. I am so much better. I'm hardly coughing at all after 2 weeks of coughing. So had she taken the antibiotics, she would have suppressed the real cause, not gotten to the revelatory aspect of the subconscious patterns that's creating illness in her being, not just her body. The body was giving her information, but the illness is deeper. It's subconscious, psycho-emotional. So, in accessing the cause and clearing the cause, first with the flower essence and acute dosing, then with the homeopathic and supporting the physiology with the tissue salts, then you will see a quote, remarkable shift within 24 hours. So, this is the gift of suffering that we get to the bottom of the issue, the core of the issue that we are now integrated. We're integrated because the subconscious has now informed my conscious mind of cause. We're always looking for cause. So in this situation with her, it helped within 24 hours. Now it's very different with other people because we have situations that are much, much more long-standing and chronic. And that's going to take a longer period of time. So even with that situation, how to be with chronic illness and drop into the suffering without wanting anything to be different than what it is. Without wanting anything to be different than what it is. Because then what? There's no resistance. No resistance, greater flow of the vital force in the body, greater flow of intuition coming towards us. I surrender to this dis-ease and I am open to receiving the source and the cure for this dis-ease in perfect timing. These are great words to say, to receive. And until it happens, we patiently wait. I am patiently waiting for over 25 years for certain parts of my body to come back online. And it is what it is. Many other aspects are healed, but there are still others that remain. And my work is to be patient with what is and trust the process. Does it get frustrating at times? Absolutely. Take those flower essences, take the homeopathics, lift another layer of whatever is causing. But some of us have come into this world and have contracted to have significant suffering experiences, painful experiences. Why? Because that suffering is a form of transformation. It's a polishing of the soul in order to do some type of work in the world, some sort of a contribution, perhaps. I remember around 33, it was about the 50th year of my dark night of the soul, and I went through it for about 20 to 25 years. And I was just beside myself because it was continuous, this pain and suffering in my physical body, as well as my mind and emotions and chronic fatigue, and on the list went of problems, what I thought were problems. And I didn't understand why I had to go through this process. I thought there must have been something terrible I did in the past life. So, hearing my complaint, my inner voice said, go watch the movie Joseph, which I may have shared on this forum before. And I was like, Joseph, there's a movie named Joseph? How coincidental is that? And I went to the video store At that point in time, there was videos in the 90s. And I asked about this movie, and he said, yeah, just came out this year. I'm like, there's a movie with my name that just came out this year that my inner voice just told me to get. Can't make this stuff up. So I get this movie and I put it on, and I realize it's the biblical story of Joseph and this man that did nothing wrong and was sold into slavery by his own family, and the suffering that he went through as a slave. But he was purchased by a master, and he got along very well with the master. And because of his level of intelligence, he really created an amazing business for this man. So Joseph was his pride and joy. So after 10 years of going through this experience with this master, the wife of the master tries to seduce Joseph, and he denies her advances. And she says, if you choose to deny me, I will tell my husband that you put your hands on me. And he said, do what you wish. I cannot betray my master. So she goes to her husband and says that Joseph put his hands on her. And the master knows she's lying, but there's nothing he can do because he has to honor his wife. And so he has to let Joseph go and put him in prison. Not a very nice prison, but for 2 years, he's in prison, sitting there, going through this experience, being laughed at because he is a Jew in Egypt. And so he doesn't belong there. So he's not treated very well by the others. But he has various spiritual gifts, and one of them was the capacity to read dreams. And so two of the people in there were thrown in jail, and they both had dreams, and they asked him to translate the dreams. So the translation came, and he explained to them what was going to happen, that one was going to be freed in 3 days and be found innocent, and the other was going to be found guilty and killed in 3 days. And exactly as he saw it, it happened. And so, fast forward when the Pharaoh has these dreams that he knows are very significant dreams, no one in his kingdom can translate these dreams properly because he knows when it's translated properly. No one can translate it, and it's very, very important because he's a divine incarnation and he knows when something is significant. So, the one who was not killed in prison, who had his dream read correctly from Joseph, suggested that he call upon Joseph, which the the Pharaoh was mortified at such a suggestion. How dare you even suggest I have a slave come and read the Pharaoh's dreams? And he said, well, that's all I had got for you, Pharaoh. He did it properly. He did it correctly for two of us. And so he's an option. So ultimately, he brings him in, and he doesn't bow when he sees the Pharaoh. He stands in his truth. So all that suffering that he went through was primed for this moment in time to stay strong, to maintain the faith, courage, trust that he is going through this process for a specific reason. So the Pharaoh is enraged, says he can cut his head off for not bowing. And then Joseph, he calls him to the front and tells him his dreams, and Joseph correctly translates the dreams. The 7 fatted calves are 7 years of great success with the crops, with the grains. And the 7 emaciated cows are 7 years of famine. And immediately the Pharaoh knew it was correct. Immediately. And so he said, what do you suggest we do with this situation? And the response was collect extra grain for 7 years for the 7 years of famine. Very, very simple. That is what happens when you go through the level of suffering that transforms the inner self, whereby the illusion is dissolved the illusion within is dissolved because you dropped into the space of darkness, the unconscious, and you transmuted it by going through the periods of suffering, by facing the darkness rather than running away from it or distracting yourself or getting caught up in external worldly things. And so ultimately, Joseph is given the position of second to the Pharaoh to run this whole system, which ultimately saved all of Egypt. And curiously enough, when his brothers came to get the grain and he recognized them, he forgave all of them for what they did because he knew that their behavior, that they as catalysts brought him to this place where he could be of service. That right there is a phenomenal realization that those who supposedly have caused harm and suffering to us actually were serving us, supporting us in our healing process. So we're not to go against those people per se, or go against what is coming our way, those catalysts that perpetuate our suffering. We're here to learn what the catalyst is offering us. Why have I called this experience into my life? If I am cause and I am creator of my life, and my field of consciousness is continuously bringing to me that which I need for the evolution of my consciousness, then I will reject nothing. I will accept everything because it's my creation. I'm not a victim. If I'm a victim, I have no power. If I'm the creator, I have all the power. So being with whatever presents itself, situations, people, communities, whatever it is that presents itself is part of the healing process, especially if there's a reaction. The greater the reaction, the greater the potential for healing. The greater the reaction, the greater the suffering, the greater the potential for healing. So after witnessing that movie and receiving the guidance to watch that movie, it was undeniable that my healing process was not just a personal experience, but transpersonal. That I was going through what I was going through for something much, much greater than myself. Who knows for when? This lifetime, next lifetime? I have no idea. It's not my business to know. It's not my business to get the answers to why. I don't know why I have to go through all of this. Maybe one day it'll be revealed. But all that suffering I went through has most assuredly turned me into the healer I am. It initiated me. So suffering is a form of initiation. Because by going through that, by facing the darkness, the shadows, the pain, the suffering, by going through all the detoxes, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, I have become a clearer channel, a clearer receptor for intuition, for insights, a greater healer, capacity with greater transmission for healing energy. So to me, all of that suffering is useful because I don't even remember a good amount of it anymore. It's done. And I have a body that is in better shape now than 30 years ago because that's what the light does. The light enlightens. It feeds and nourishes the cells of every body. And the more light you bring in, the more you will purify, detoxify, and cleanse. So each one of us is slated to have particular experiences due to our soul contracts before we incarnated. So why fight it? Why argue with it? Why not embrace it? Why not allow it all to reveal itself and bring you to the place that you were born to go to, bring you to those experiences you were born to have? It does help to have someone translate the experiences you're having. I had a teacher that I would go to on a regular basis once a month, and she would help me tremendously to keep moving through the process rather than getting stuck in the crevices of victimhood or physiological constraints that I would get caught up in. So it was helpful to have healers, seers, mentors who've been through the process to be a midwife to me. And so, because of their support, now I am the midwife. And this is how it works. We each support the other on the path to the spiritual path up the mountaintop. We're all supporting each other through this process. And the suffering, the experiences of suffering awaken us, awakens the sleeping soul that thinks it's a body and thinks it's a mind with these thoughts, right? We are living, breathing souls in this dream, and the soul is here to wake up, to realize it's in a dream, and to raise its consciousness so that it may lift the veils and see through the illusion, thereby transmitting its frequency of higher consciousness, of love, acceptance, compassion, and so on. Transmitting that energy just by its presence, just by its presence. So, this process of going through suffering helps the ego to crack the shell of its identity, right? There's this aura we have around us. This is who I am. This is my identity. I am a man. I am Italian. I am 58. And on it goes. That is all cementing our consciousness in third dimensional form. So when we go through the suffering process, we actually crack this limited identity. That is why the ego suffers so much, because it was attached to this identity, to this limited perception of self. But in order to rise in consciousness, we have to keep letting go of these identities that we've accepted as our self. The identity is useful as a persona in the world. It is not useful when we concretize our consciousness saying, this is all that exists, is me in this form in this world, and that's it. No, it's not it at all. We are energetic beings. We are multidimensional. We are much, much, much greater than these bodies, these minds, and the five senses. So when the soul awakens, it awakens through the suffering of the realization of the limitations of this realm, the limitations that we have been fed, indoctrinated through school, through medicine, through the government, through religion. We are continuously told who we are, what we should do, and who we should be. So the suffering cracks that shell of conditioning, breaks us out of it, and then our consciousness, our vision expands, and we see more, we see through things, we have revelations. This is what it's about. This is what's available to all of us. But we have to take it step by step. You cannot, my inner voice always says, you cannot skip any steps. You must take every step on the spiritual mountain, the stairway, and the spiritual mountain. Every step, and until that step is complete, you cannot go to the next step. So here we are, awakening, evolving, realizing who we are in the greater scheme of things. But no matter what you may think of yourself, it's a million times greater than that. A million times greater. So it behooves us to embrace the experiences of pain and suffering in the world. Nietzsche says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I fully, fully am on board with that, especially when we go through the upgrades. If you all have heard of those, where the physical body goes through these times of exhaustion and pain and suffering, physiological, physical suffering. And through that pain and suffering, the body is upgraded. Through the illness and disease, the body is upgrading. We are becoming more filled with light. So disease is a useful process. Remember as kids, I mean, I remember getting the chicken pox, getting the measles was a good thing because what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You go through the disease process and your body is upgraded because of that disease, because of that suffering and discomfort. And then what many don't remember is that by going through those illnesses early on in life, it staves off chronic illness later on in life, like cancer. So it actually behooves us to go through these experiences, through these sufferings, through these physical diseases, even the acute ones, especially the acute ones, cold, fever, whatever is going on, asthma, allergies, the acute situations, you want to really ride the wave, go through it, support the body absolutely energetically and with natural medicine, because that's the flow, that's going with the flow. And in doing so, you will bring yourself through a nice upgrade. So it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. And that also relates to, on the spiritual level and on the psycho-emotional level, facing one's fears and shadows and darkness. You face that. You ingest it. In alchemy, the term is to ingest the shadow, which means you face it, you look at it, you take it on, you bring it in, you consume it, you transmute it, and then you have the power of the shadow. You have the power of that disease. You have the power of the darkness. It doesn't have power over you. You have the power of the fear. This is the power that comes back to us when we are willing, ready, and able to walk through these periods of suffering and transmuting that. And the lifespan of the caterpillar going to the butterfly is also another great example, and oftentimes used as the caterpillar is living in this ego personality reality. It thinks this is what life is, until one day, all of a sudden, it starts to dissolve. Who am I? What am I? What is the purpose of life? That could be considered the dark night of the soul, where you completely lose your previous identity and iteration of yourself. And so here is this previous caterpillar, now called nothingness, in a cocoon, protecting itself while it goes through this transmutation, wondering what's going on, who am I, what am I? But it has to sit patiently in the process, until it is complete. And then when it's complete, something will happen. Something will inform it that it can now emerge. But it's a process. And what emerges is what appears to be a totally new entity, but it is the previous entity transmuted. That's it. That is the gift that suffering brings to us. But it's also good to note one of the that there's a type of suffering that is self-imposed, and it's the suffering through ignorance. For example, knowing that a certain type of food is not good for you and you choose to eat it anyway, giving yourself stomach aches or intestinal pain. That is a self-imposed suffering due to sabotage. That's in our control. That's in our control. And when we're done suffering, we will emerge out of that as well. So even that suffering is useful until we're tired of ourself, until we're tired of various addicted patterns like overworking, overeating, oversexing, overshopping, over, right? At a certain point, like I was a sugar addict, I said, I'm tired of having stomach aches. I'm not bringing this into my house anymore. And that's the end of suffering. But I had to choose that. I had to consciously choose to no longer cause harm to myself. The spiritual suffering that I'm speaking about earlier and the dark night of the soul is that which was signed up for before incarnation. We are destined for that. Not everybody is here to go through a dark night of the soul. This isn't a one-size-fits-all reality. This is choose what you wish in each incarnation. So sometimes some of us choose very challenging lifetimes because we want to achieve a certain level of consciousness. Like at a certain point, I said, can I change this contract? Can I alter my contract? And I heard you could, we don't advise it though. And I said, duly noted, no changes. Because that's the ego personality that is impatient speaking. So we're the one in command. We have free will. We can choose. We can choose our perception of suffering as well. Right? Perception. There's a saying, pain is unavoidable. Suffering is a choice. So as Buddha said, there is suffering. But as this one is saying, that suffering is a choice in terms of your perception of how you look at things. So if I'm having an experience, I can name it, I can limit it, I can diminish it, I can identify it. But in doing all those things, then I am creating the experience rather than being with the experience. I don't have to give a name to anything anymore. I can simply be with whatever it is, not calling it good, bad, right, wrong, joy, sorrow, just having the experience without having to put a value on it.